This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz. Very excited to be speaking with Wayne Staples about his VFX work on House of the Dragon. How are you, Wayne?
I'm really good, thank you.
What is it like building a dragon? Where do you even start with something like that?
Well, I guess the first answer to that is it's awesome building a dragon because it's like not many people get to build dragons for a job, and it's a pretty great job. But in our case, say like for building a dragon or for any creature that we work on, we always try to build them of something in reality, if that makes sense. So, in case of House of the Dragon, a lot of the dragon designs have been done. We worked on Sea Smoke, which is a new one for the last season. But we will go and we'll look at different types of creatures, anything from bats through to lizards, through to everything else, and just sort of see how do these creatures actually exist in our real world? What are the physics of them like? How do they move? How do they support themselves? And we try and draw just a lot of inspiration from that and sort of understand how they work, and then that's combined with what is the show requirements of the dragon. It's got to give performance, this type of thing, so we then have to sort of think about that as well. How do we build the face so that we can show expression? How do we make sure we can read the eyes? How do we do all these sorts of things that are important for performance?
It's very interesting, and I have to imagine that a show like that, given the meticulous nature of the opening credits that change every episode, there are very strict requirements in terms of, as you say, how realistic it has to be for a, fictional creature.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like and particularly the clue is sort of in the name, isn't it? House of the Dragon. It's like it's a show about dragons ultimately. I mean, it's not. It's about people, obviously, of course, and relationships and the usual things that drive them. But when the name dragon is inside the title, it kind of says, well, it's sort of something you got to take fairly seriously, which obviously you should do anyway, but really seriously in this case.
You look at all in your work at pre-existing cinematic dragons, or you're trying to look off of only real world inspiration?
No, we look at everything. We look at work that we may have done in house, or that we may have seen in either on in film or in television. We sort of like, so we do always try to study what is out there, and in our case, we always build on what we may have done in the past. And if you look at the work that Weta has done, the type of shows that it's done over the years, there are creatures inside there that, well, obviously there were dragons and things like the Hobbit, but there are other creatures as well that have flying sort of creatures that have a similar type form that we build off.
And you're also finding multiple dragons, which is interesting because there have to be subtle enough differences, but also the same way that all humans don't look near enough alike that they can be substantially different.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, the biggest trick I think with House of Dragon is they're radically different sizes. From like Vermithor, which is a big guy down this way. They're actually their scale is huge. And what is interesting about that is you start to get into a few issues or challenges with physics, because a creature that was really that big in reality, might react in a way that isn't necessarily a great performance wise. It might be pretty big and lumbering and slow, but you don't want to see that. You don't want to see a big lumbering slow dragon. You want to see something with a lot of energy and performance. So you have to you then start to work out, well, this is what it would really be like, but is that what is serves the story correctly? So how do we then start to move on from there?
I know you also worked extensively on creating Harrenhal, which is just a very impressive thing. I mean, again, my just always says, where do you like? We see it at a certain point, and it is so impressive. And a lot of times, I think audiences have no idea when they're looking at something if it is completely, you know, created by someone like you, or if it is a real location, and that's got to be pretty impressive. So, where do you start with Harrenhal to have some sort of design?
Shall I tell you one of my favorite things, actually, just before I answer that, is I love watching House of the Dragon and the work that perhaps wasn't done by us, but was done by some of our colleagues in other facilities. And I love seeing the work that they've done and trying to work out, oh, how much of that was on set with how much of it was really great. Because it's always, I get as much enjoyment out of trying to work out at times how much of that was a set piece versus how much of that, some of this really impressive work. But for something like Harrenhal, so Harrenhal had been established before, it was in Game of Thrones. And so there was a certain, this burnt out wreck for it. But then, so we sort of have that as a basis, but then we just really do an awful lot of research on, ruined castles, ruined fortresses around the world, ones that have obvious fire damage to them, and we see what does it look like when stone has been burned? How does stone, fall apart and break apart over time? And so it's really just looking at an awful lot of pictures and us discussing it amongst ourselves, or we try to understand, okay, well, this has fallen down because of this reason or this reason, so we should incorporate that idea into what we've done here as well.
I like what you said about, looking at other people's work and admiring a lot of it. And I know that for this, you also had to work with a number of other companies
Yeah.
and sort of pass stuff back and forth. I assume that has to be common on a show of this scale, but how do you approach something like that? Are there, drawbacks to that, just not being fully in charge of a certain subset of the project?
We just work it out both with the studio, with the client side VFX team, and also sometimes just with the actual vendors ourselves. We'll actually meet and talk with them and say, well, listen, we think in this case it probably makes the most sense if we provide that, or in this case, if you provide us with this, because we're looking after these other type of things. And generally, it's just simply common sense in terms of what makes the most sense there. And one of the things I love about our industry is, we are actually a pretty close industry, even people might be, other companies that we work with, but we all sort of start to know each other and that as well. And we all have the common goal of just getting the best possible thing that we can up on the screen.
Can you tell me about some of this season's most ambitious sequences?
Probably two or maybe three spring to mind. Two of them involve sea smoke. One's inside Dragonmont, where they try to tame him, and that doesn't end up well. And the second time, when we actually see him and he meets Adam for the first time down at the beach. And the reason why they're challenging is because they're big performance pieces for sea smoke, and you have to be able to try to work out what's going through his mind at the time, with a creature that doesn't speak, obviously. So it's got to all be done through facial performance and through body language. So they're challenging to do, for that. And then technically, there's the sort of big one shot where Vermithor just goes on a rampage and decides to torch the entire inside of Dragonmont until Hugh eventually calms him down, and he decides he likes Hugh at the end. But that's because that's one long continuous shot of things happening. So right from the planning of that through to the execution of stitching the pieces together, through to silly things, like I said, Vermithor is huge. So how do you stage that performance inside that, so that camera work and everything works there? So they were different challenges in their own right, I think.
What do you think would surprise audiences most about this whole process and just what goes into it?
Sometimes, I don't know. That's a really good question. Sometimes I think people don't quite appreciate, I almost want to say, the level of care that we have for the work. People talk about, oh, it's just CGI or it's just this, but it sort of dismisses, I think, the passion and the artistry and the technical side that actually goes in to making these things happen. And it is a massive team effort by a lot of people who are actually very invested in the show. They love the show, they love working on it, they're excited about it. I'm just excited to be part of it and to be part of that whole world. And I don't know whether people quite realize that, sort of at time, as to how much care and attention and people in this industry really do love for it, because I do think it's very easy to dismiss it, and people talk about things like AI or other things like that. But you know what? There's a massive amount of human work goes into these things.
I've spoken to a few of the supporting cast members and I've tried to understand, like, do they get what's going on in this show? Because I feel like, as somebody who is not just a casual viewer, it's hard to always follow each, thing along. Do you feel like you have a good idea, or you're sort of like in your lane? Like you get the dragons, you get the places, you don't necessarily know all the, family trees and all that.
Right. I yes, it's yeah, and I think that's true. It's funny. I know that some of my colleagues, if they when they work on things, they do like, as you said, to know everything down to the family trees. I kind of like to focus on what it is that we're doing, understanding perhaps where it sits contextually in the bigger things. But the reason why I do that, because then I get to watch the show and I see the episodes that we didn't work on, and it's so much fun because it's complete. Wow, this happens. It's a complete surprise to me because that's the thing. I mean, I'm a fan of the show as well, so um, I sort of want to, I really want to enjoy it and sit, sit and get those surprises each week. So I try not to know. I'm trying to know more than I really need to deliver things.
I don't know what the timeline is or anything or what you've heard, but I'm sure you'll be watching season 3 when it comes out. Do you have a sense of whether you'll be involved? Would you like to return again to this world?
Oh yeah, I mean it's always great to return there. It's I worked a long time ago on Game of Thrones, and I just really enjoy the world of Westeros, and I think how that's developed and what's come out of it. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to work there, and ultimately it's like it's not a hard decision to say, do you want to go and work on some dragons during the day? It's a pretty easy thing to do.
Usually, when I talk to Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, it's like the highest profile thing that they're working on or they've ever really done. But you're also involved in a small film series that is quite popular, the Avatar,
I
world.
Yeah, I
I
did.
don't
I
know.
did a couple of tours on Pandora on the first and on the second one. And yeah, I mean I've been lucky, I've worked on things like shows like Lord of the Rings and all sorts of others going back over time. But it is funny though, because as popular as those are, and it's been amazing as it has been to work on them, the bit that gives me the street cred with things like my nephews and things was working on Game of Thrones. It was like it was just so popular. It was like, yeah, okay, you work on these other things, that's great, but man, you work on Game of Thrones. Okay, apparently that's yeah, that's the cool thing to work on. But I mean, I enjoy, I love working on everything that I do, from very small things through to big things.
I think part of the thing with that is, I think the entirety of Game of Thrones aired between the first and second Avatar movies, right? There's not
Yeah,
distinction.
well,
You know,
that is fair. I would have to say yes, there is that truth inside it. But yeah, actually, that's true. I sort of yeah. No, I don't really think. I don't. I try not to think about that because then it makes me think about how many years are passing and whether my beard's going grayer. So
well, what else do you have coming up? What's next for you?
I have a number of different things. I do have some shows coming up, some things that I probably can't talk about too much at the moment. But I very much enjoy working in the streaming world. I love the world of long format TV. I watch a lot of it, probably far too much. But there's so much amazing work out there, and we as a company get to work on a huge amount of it. And as I said, some of our colleagues in other companies do some great work. And I look at the work, the people that with the Emmys coming up, they're in the same category that I'm in. And you are. It always sounds a bit cliche, but it's actually very true. You are quite honoured to be nominated with those people. So it's good because the work is so great out there, and it's good. It pushes us to keep on improving what we do as well, which is important.
Well, I do always like to close, since this is awards buzz, by asking you, what you watch, what you've seen recently, and particularly what has, visually impressed you of your colleagues' work.
One of my colleagues I'm working with at the moment, he's actually he's actually up on in the same award for The Last of Us. So Nick, who's also nominated for The Last of Us season 2, and that's pretty amazing work through there. So it's the type of thing that if Nick wins, then I'll be okay because they did great work on it. I'll forgive him, and we'll still have a congratulatory drink with them. So yeah, like The Last of Us is probably the most recent thing, sort of from my colleagues type work that I've seen. And I must admit, I keep on going back and watching non-visual effects shows as well. Like I just went back and rewatched Justified just because there's just such great shows out there.
Justified is a great show, and it's funny now seeing Walton Goggins, get a little more mainstream attention for The White Lotus because there's the only thing better than Justified for him might be The Shield, but Justified is pretty incredible. So a lot of good
He,
stuff out
he, he is extraordinary. I mean, Timothy Oliphant and Ebsco, they're all great, but Walton Goggins is pretty extraordinary inside that show. So it's good to see him. Good to see him recognized.
there. Absolutely. Well, Wayne, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure learning so much. I always, feel like I know a lot about movies, and then I talk to someone like you, and there's, movies and TV. There's so much left to learn, and thanks for giving me a
You
little
know
peek
what?
behind the curtain.
I'll tell you a secret. I talk to other people inside the industry, and I feel exactly the same way. I say, oh, I think I know a bit about this, and then I talk to, cinematographers or makeup or things. Oh man, I just know nothing about what you be about this, which is good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Wayne. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Love to talk to you, Abe.